Okay, the math professor is on the air. Please turn in your quizzes. But one advantage of now having my sneeze guards, I can take the damn mask off. Okay, so I did not make it clear before that it is okay to use your book and your notes during any quizzes or tests. Because my theory is let the students have open book, open notes, and make the quiz harder. I do now have the correct book. It turns out it had been waiting at the bookstore for me. Unfortunately, these guys have the world's hardest website to navigate, so I was unable to download the slideshow that matches the new book. Bloody hell. All right, so last time we did chapter 1. Rebecca, you can catch up by watching the video on Moodle. Well, actually, it's just a link to the video there, but and I believe I posted the homework on Moodle as well, or it may be in the video, or both. All right, so forward into the past. Where we are now, we're on chapter 2. All right, so why do we have to worry about strategy as project managers? Okay, well, first of all, the organization's mission and strategy may change during the time that we are at the organization. In fact, we recently changed the mission statement here at Navajo Tech, and I honor them for it. So we have to be able to respond to those changes and use with the appropriate decisions about what projects we're going to do and what adjustments we need to make to our current projects. So if we understand our strategy, then we can be good advocates for the projects that we're doing or we want to do, and point out how they're aligned with the firm's mission. Now, having a good mission statement and a good strategy is very important. Ideally, a mission statement is short enough that everybody will remember what it is. Although I remember working at one company where the mission statement was so long, it was not in the office for people to read. They had actually put it on a wall in the shop that was about 18 feet high. They needed that much space to get their mission statement up there. Well, that's no good. Who's going to remember that? You know, you've got to be like an actor who's used to memorizing material. All right, so projects need to align with our strategy. And we get mistakes if we don't understand how our projects help accomplish our strategy. So we may focus on problems and solutions that have a very low strategic priority. I actually have seen this very often in business and industry, where the company has a certain strategy, but what our project is doing is solving a problem that nobody cares about except the boss. That has nothing to do with the strategy. All right. Focusing on the immediate customer rather than the whole marketplace and value chain. Customer focus is a very important thing, but if we're only focusing on one customer and we're not looking ahead to how do we get more customers or how do we satisfy all our customers, that is a mistake. Overemphasizing technology. In that way, we get projects where we're just doing technology because it's cool stuff and not because it helps us in any way. This is another mistake I see companies and industry doing. The process they have now works, it produces enough to satisfy the customer demand, but it's cool to have this new machine. So companies get out there and they spend tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars pursuing some kind of cool strategy. Can we help you, Mansuru?
Yeah, just checking on me.
All right, carry on.
Okay.
All right, so the fourth point is solving customer issues with a product or service rather than focusing on our 20% that gives us 80% of the value. Pareto was an Italian mathematician who came up with what's called the 80-20 rule, or Pareto's law. What that means is that 20% of causes result in 80% of actions, right? So you have a car sales company, you have 10 salesmen, 2 of them will be selling 80% of the cars. In fact, having worked briefly in car sales, I can validate that this is true. So we do want to satisfy that 80% of our customers, create that 80% of our value, but let's make sure we're not going wild on the one customer who's just bitching and moaning for no good reason. And I think we all know this happens. And very often the company will end up spending all their time trying to fix that person's problems, which really stem from their personal problems, possibly, rather than let's satisfy everyone as much as we can. Even though the old saying is the customer is always right, you know what? Sometimes the customer can be wrong. And looking for perfection on things that only the project team really cares about. This actually goes back to the first point. Sometimes it's the boss is upset about it and no one else even cares. But, you know, we keep having to work on it because the boss says, get in there, I don't like what you've done so far. Damn those picky bosses. All right, so how do we manage our projects in terms of strategy? All right, so if we're going to have that kind of strategic management, every project has to be linked to our strategy. If I remembered that Salambi was there, I would have turned on the other set of lights, but oh well. That gives us focus for our organization. Because our strategy is aimed at where do we want to go, right? We don't say we're going to drive to Albuquerque and then go west on I-40 when we hit that. Well, unless you're in Tucumcari, but we're obviously not. Right? So, we're going to have to respond to the changes in the external environment. We call that environmental scanning. We're keeping an eye on what other companies are doing, which we often will call benchmarking. We're seeing what other people are doing and deciding, all right, do we want to do that to keep up with these guys, or are they going in totally the wrong way? And we think we can exploit that. We've got to be careful because our resources are going to be finite, right? We don't have an unlimited supply of people we can throw at projects, or money, or equipment. So we have to be sure that we're using those scarce resources in a way that makes sense as far as furthering our strategy. So, we need to link together our mission, our goals, our objectives, our strategy, and the implementation of all of these. Projects are going to be a big part of the implementation. If our goals are things like we want to improve sales by 25%, well, have we got a project that helps do that? We might have. We might have our sales and marketing people coming up with a project, and they need the other parts of the organization to help them out to make that happen. All right, so when we're doing strategic management, we need to make sure that we're doing these 4 activities. Review and define the organizational mission, right? Now, we assume this happens at a high level where we say, what is the mission that we're on, and how is what we're doing now making that happen? We want long-range goals and objectives. One of my favorite writers about organizations is a guy named C. Northcote Parkinson. He wrote a very famous book called Parkinson's Law about why organizations work the way they do. Right? Now, in a lot of books, including this one, there's a very halcyon view of how organizations work and everyone's working together for the good of the company. And Parkinson says, you know what? It doesn't really work like that. Our organizational mission, it's very important that it is, that we have our strategy and our mission aligned, as we talked about from the last slide, or at least I pontificated on. We want long-range goals and objectives. One of the things Parkinson talked about is when you see companies failing, very often they've set very short-term goals and objectives that are easy to achieve. So this is similar to archery, where you set up the target 3 feet away, and then you say, oh, man, I hit the bullseye every time. We want to make sure that we're looking at our strategies and we're formulating, changing them as we need, so that we reach the objectives and the goals that we're setting. This is going to be a very important thing because, you know, as I said before, all of these things have to work together. We're going to implement our strategies through projects. Some projects may be pretty small, right? We're going to increase our sales by 25%. All right, well, that might involve just getting the advertising department stirred up to make a better ad campaign to sell our products or our services. But it might also mean that we need to go down and talk to the production department and say, hey, you guys need to be ready to make 25% more than you're making now, because we're more or less selling everything that we make. All right, so the strategic management process very much like the life cycle of a project has 4 different stages. In the first stage, we're asking in a very broad way, where are we now? Right? One of the things where we can really go wrong, or one of the ways we can really go wrong, is to not understand where we are now. Right? We think we're the leader in the industry when in fact we're dragging up the last place. All right, so we do we review and revise our mission statement, right? Which should, in a broad sense, define what is our mission, right? And a good mission statement would be something like, we want to make the best product in our industry that is made. Or we want to sell the most products anyone in our industry does, right? But whatever we think is our best approach, right? Do we want to be Rolls-Royce selling a few really expensive, really good cars? Or do we want to be Hyundai selling a bunch of cars for not very much money and, you know, okay quality, but not the best? We have to look at the outside world. What are our opportunities because the other people in our industry aren't doing them, and what are the external threats to us? we have to look at our internal environment, which is what are our strengths and what are our weaknesses. And this, in both of these, very often, that's where, looking for something in particular?
Is that Rebecca?
Yes, it is Rebecca.
Oh, okay. Can I talk to her for 1 minute? She just won't.
Well, you can, but she's in the middle of class here. Right? Very often we call this SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
What time will you finish?
The first one is SWOT.
I'm sorry?
The first one is SWOT.
Is
The
that
first-
everything in the papers?
These two
For all the students?
we often do as SWOT analysis. SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Okay, and you know, you can go to seminars where they'll divide a big piece of paper in 4 parts, and they'll write strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats in each of the squares. This is, and I don't put that down. It's a good thing to do, to know what are we going to do? How are we going to get from where we are now to where we want to be? Oh, wait, that's actually down here. Okay, so all of that goes together to set our strategy and our objectives. What do we intend to be? We are going to think in terms of what are our strategic choices for projects that help move the ball ahead in the direction we want to go. Right? When we're playing a game, we always know what direction we want the ball to go to score for our team. How about that for a sports analogy with no actual sport mentioned? And then how are we going to get there? We're going to implement that strategy. That goes into our project selection, and then that is going to form our projects. Oh, death race I stay.
Did you say SWOT?
SWOT, S-W-O-T, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Okay. When we set our objectives, we think of them through the paradigm of SMART. We have to be specific. We don't want to say something like, oh, we want to do better. Well, we want to do better how? We want more sales, we want higher quality, we want faster service. We've got to be specific. It's got to be measurable. We can't just say, oh, we want more sales. We say, we want 25% more sales. Or even more specifically, we want 25% more sales of this line of products. The project, the objective has to be assignable. We have to put one person in charge of making that happen, which is something I have argued with our administration here about many, many times, without persuading them that that actually has to happen. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. It needs to be realistic, right? We can't make our objective that we're gonna flap our arms and fly to the moon. That's not realistic. And we have to make it well, I'm used to saying it timely, but they say time-related. It's the same thing. What is the length of time we're going to assign to get this project done? All right, so our project portfolio management, we need to have a priority system. And it should be one that is pretty robust as far as we're not ending up wasting our time doing some piddly little projects that don't matter. All right, so very often we have an implementation gap. In other words, we're not all on the same page. We have to have understanding of the strategy, and everybody has to agree that that is the strategy with our top management, our middle level managers, because the top management is going to do a lot to set the strategy, but it's the middle level managers that are going to have to make it happen. Well, of course, one thing that always gets in the way is the politics of our organization. I'm sure you've all worked somewhere where projects are selected based on who is who and not what would be the best for the organization. So we get people who have a lot of influence that get to say what projects are going to be done, but they're not necessarily the best project. Now, Judith, you know, up on this computer here, I have PDF copies of all of these slideshows, and you can come up and download them. Perhaps you didn't know that, since I've only brought it up now. And we have the problem that we're going to have conflicts about who gets to use what resource and when they're going to get to use it. If we have a big company where we're going to have more than one project going at a time, we are going to have interdependency between those based on resources that everybody needs to use. So sometimes we get a situation where a project starts, it has to stop for a while because another project is using the product development center or some other part of the company that's needed. And then it gets started again when they're done using it, and now it's our turn. Now this obviously isn't ideal. And we need to schedule very carefully to try and avoid conflict in this area. And I'll give you an example. The engineering classes here, I have ended up creating the schedules for them. Now, if this were a normal semester, this room would be busy from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. Every class slot, every hour and a half is filled. In fact, if you look at the schedules in my office for this room and the room next door, it says that's going to happen. We now have so many engineering classes that we have to schedule that tightly in order to be able to get all the classes in we need. In fact, we had to go and beg Dr. Bowman to let us use one of the mods that they moved this semester. Now, because we have the COVID crisis and we're dealing with that whole situation, it didn't end up happening that way. Because so many people are doing their classes online. But if this were just a normal semester, we have to do that. There's no way we can have all our classes without doing that. Oh, okay. All right, so what are the benefits of a good project portfolio management? Well, one thing is we have discipline in the project selection process. Instead of just, oh, I think we'll do this today, which I have literally seen at places I've worked. We have a set of goals that we're moving towards with our projects that, again, help us reinforce the strategy. So we're linking our project selection to our strategic metrics. Right? And our projects should always be linked to our strategy. We need to prioritize project proposals by a common set of criteria, not on politics or emotion. It's very easy to get caught up in the emotional appeal. Oh, we have to do this project for the starving people in India, or whatever emotional appeal you want to make, right? In fact, unfortunately, we have come to a place in our country where everything is based on emotional appeal and nothing is based on reasonableness and what would actually work out best for the American people. By using good portfolio management, we're going to allocate our resources to our projects that align with the strategic direction. We may have some project that is a real on-again, off-again project because it just doesn't move the ball ahead that much. It helps a little bit, but we have so many other projects that are important, right? We've got to get in there and we've got to improve those sales. We've got to improve our capacity to create our product or service, right? Whereas this other one, well, okay, maybe it's okay, it's a good one, not so much.
So, excuse me, but all the points that you're bringing up, is that for the project manager? Kind of like the job of the project manager to kind of...
It is partially the job of the project manager, but it may, or more likely will be the job of the project manager. At a big company, you'll have a project office that oversees all of the projects that are going on. That's the level that these points are mostly done at. We should keep them in mind when we are managing projects, but this is included more to give you an overview of everything around projects than that you are going to have to worry about this as a project manager. When you're the project manager, then you'll have to worry about it. Okay, we're going to balance our risk against all projects. So, let's say we're working for a very big company. We're working in the project office and we're thinking about a bunch of projects, right? So we have some projects that are pretty low risk. We're going to make a new type of DVD player. All right, well that's pretty low risk. Everybody knows what a DVD player is, how to make it. You know, we can turn a bunch of engineers loose on that. Well, they'll have that done in 27 years, but if we threaten to shoot them, maybe they'll have it done in 6 months. But if, on the other hand, we decide we're going to build a time machine, well, that's an extremely high-risk project. Because, well, first of all, a lot of physicists say building a time machine wouldn't be possible. Although I remember what Clark said, that when eminent physicists say something can't be done, they're almost certainly wrong. Second of all, if you do build a time machine, if somebody goes back to the past, they might change the past enough that our whole company and we won't exist, right? So there's a lot of risks around that project, right? So we may have, you know, like 14 projects like building DVD players and radios and one project for building a time machine that's kind of our wild and crazy project that we're thinking about, right? It's okay to have a wild and crazy project if the rest of our projects are, we know pretty much are going to make us money. But it's not okay to have 14 wild and crazies and one that's kind of sane and rational. Okay, when we have this kind of overall portfolio management, some projects just shouldn't be done.
So who is in charge of saying, or who's in charge of killing the project?
Well, let's say somebody seriously proposes doing the time machine project. Okay? And all our other projects are things like, we're gonna build radios, we're gonna build stereos, we're gonna build DVD players. We would have a set of criteria where we would say, well, how much money can we make from this? How long is the project going to take? How much money is it going to cost to make it? We'll have a whole bunch of things like that so we can score all these projects and decide which one is the best. Now, I'm having trouble believing Time Machine is going to come in as the best project. Probably, almost certainly, it's going to come in as the lowest rated project. Whereas designing a new smartphone might be the #1 project, because we've got a whole new take. We're gonna make one that has a holographic vision on it, right? Nobody's doing that now. If we know how to put that technology in there, all of a sudden, we're catapulted in front of all the other companies.
Could it be possible that another company could be doing the same project as you? Would that become a race? Like, somebody from, like, your roommate says, yeah, we're doing the same project, we're doing the exact same thing.
You're actually catapulting it way ahead here to when I start talking about operational security,
Okay.
so that people don't find out what we're doing. No, that is a possibility. And in fact, it has often been done that companies will start doing a project because they hear somebody else is doing it. Like in the movie business, that happens all the time. Because all those guys blab all the time, and all of a sudden, you're having a drink with a friend in a bar, and they say, well, we're doing a movie about an intelligent monkey who wins the Nobel Prize. Next thing you know, 2 movie studios are doing pictures about intelligent monkeys. And then 3, and the next thing you know, it's the summer of monkey movies. And another benefit is our communication and agreement on what projects should be is better when we have that kind of portfolio management, right? Now, portfolio management, a really big company, they'll have a project office that'll be overseeing everything. A small company might be doing 2 or 3 projects, and like the director of development is doing that as part of his job. And he's got a bunch of other things. He's also overseeing the building of the new facility, and he's seeing, things like that. A really small company might only be doing 1 project at a time, or even not doing any projects except occasionally, all right, next month we're gonna do this project kind of thing. All right, so how does a system like this work? Well, one thing is we have to classify projects. In engineering, we classify projects by whether they're a service project, something that we have to do for some reason, like we have to improve safety in a certain area, or we have to comply with EPA mandates on pollution, or something like those. Or it's a revenue earning project where the company is expecting to make money on it, right? And we could break each of those categories down further if we really wanted to. All right, so the selection criteria are going to depend on classification. If the EPA is telling us we're polluting too much and we have to do something to stop that, well, we don't have that much choice about whether or not we're going to do that project. It's got to be done. The only question is, how can we do it the cheapest way possible? But if it's a revenue producing project, then we're going to ask several things. We're going to say things like, how long are we going to be able to make money out of this? How much is it going to cost at the beginning? what level are we shooting for? Are we going for the Rolls-Royce level or the Hyundai level of quality? The next point is, what are the sources of the proposals? Do we only take proposals that are given to us by the board of directors and the top management? Or do we have suggestion boxes out and everybody can put in a suggestion? Spoiler alert, my favorite is suggestion boxes. How are we going to evaluate these proposals? Right? Sometimes the best proposal we may get might also look like the craziest one. So we have to be sure that things aren't just thrown in the trash without a real consideration of whether it would be a good idea or not. Because sometimes what you get out of the suggestion box, it may be a great idea, but maybe they didn't write it up very well. Right? So if you're not sure you understand what they're looking for, the best thing to do is go talk to the person that put in the suggestion. You know, what do you really see this as doing? Because I know plenty of smart people that aren't articulate. They see things, they can see how it would work, they can't necessarily explain to you. And we've got to manage our portfolio of projects, right? We can't just say, all right, you're a project manager, Michelle, here's the money, here's the people, make it happen, and then expect it in 3 months we show up, all right, where is it? No, we gotta have like reports, we gotta know what's happening in that. If a project is going super bad, we have to reevaluate whether it can still be done. Or, what do we have to do? Do we have to bring Judith in? She's our project fixer to see where they've gone wrong and say, all right, well, look, here's what we need to do to get this project back on track. Does Rebecca, as the project manager, have to say, no, we're shutting down this project. We thought we had everything we needed for this to happen, but it just looks like it's not going to go. All right, so these guys, unlike our in engineering, they classify the projects in 3 types, not 2. So a compliance project is what they call a service project. This has to be done. We're out of compliance with the laws about handicapped access or safety in our state or on the federal government level. An operational project is things that are happening right now, right? We want to improve the production of product A by 25%. Okay, that's operational. We're already doing that, but we need to do it better. Or we need to bring up the quality of something that we make. The main customer complaint is it's just kind of looks crappy. We need something that looks better. A strategic project would be more like we're setting ourselves up for the future, right? So that might be something like we're gonna build a new R&D center, right? Our guys have been trying to develop products in an old shop with a leaky roof. They got a bunch of broken tools and computers that were built in the 1990s.
So you can imagine how much space that's taking up.
You know, if you have an old enough computer, computers used to be the size of buildings.
Yeah.
And for that matter, when I was in engineering school, we learned to program computers. When the school had one computer, you could access it at the business building or the administration building, only those two places. And to put in your program, you had to punch a bunch of cards. So you'd go in, even in the first computer class, you'd have a stack of cards this high. You had to put in the compiler. The computer would read it, execute the program, and it would print out on these big green and white sheets.
Oh, gosh.
Man, I love these computers we have now. Even my first personal computer was very hard because, like, you're doing something on a program and you want to switch programs. You had to turn the computer off.
Oh, gosh.
You had to take the disk out, put the disk for the other program in, turn the computer, yeah, it was the 5 1/4 floppy. You had to turn the computer on, it would boot up that program, right? Then you do what you want on that program. If you want to switch programs, whole same thing again. Okay, so a strategic project obviously is all of these levels of projects are important, right? If OSHA is going to come shut us down because our safety is poor, we can't just let that slide. We've got to fix that. All right, so when we talk about selection criteria for our portfolio of projects, well, basically they break it down to two criteria, financial models and non-financial models. So in the financial models, we're looking at essentially how much money is this going to make us, or how much money is this going to cost us because it's a compliance project and we have to do it. Non-financial models, they say are projects of strategic importance, but again, finance is going to come into it, right? Y'all are business majors, you know that at the bottom, companies have to make money. Even nonprofit organizations have to make money. Rebecca knows that too well from her time in the business office here. Now, another way that we select projects is using a multi-weighted scoring model, right? And what we're doing there is we create a matrix and we score each project proposal based on some different criteria. Right? So the criteria might be things like, we might have how much the initial project cost is as one of those multi-weighted criteria. Might be things like, is this going to improve customer loyalty? Is this going, how high do we expect the sales to be? Come on, guys, throw me out something here.
How the ROI, the return on investment,
Return on investment is very important. Man, I wish y'all had
Net
taken my
profit loss.
engineering economy class. I'm sorry?
the net profit loss or gain.
Right. All of that should be factored in, but it's also gonna be things that are more fuzzy. Is this product gonna be easier to use than our old product was? Is this product going to be liked by the customers more than the old product or than our competitors' products? So it could be all kinds of different ways. All right, so payback model, I'm sure y'all are familiar with the concept of that for some projects, what we're the most worried about is how soon do we recover the money we put into it, right? So we're gonna measure the amount of time we think it takes to recover that investment. In that case, we're gonna say, the shorter the payback period, the better the project. So we're really emphasizing the cash flow aspect of our projects as, because of course, cash flow is important. You should never run a business that only operates because you have cash flow. And I have personally made that mistake before. Because then when bad times come, all of a sudden, oh, no business. But cash flow is important. It is a rare business that can say, okay, we're not gonna make any money on this for the next 3 years, but after that we'll be making money. All right, so problems with payback. First of all, the time value of money. I assume that y'all spend a lot of time in finance classes on how do we figure projects in terms of the time value of money. Because what can we say about our money? We can say that it's not going to be worth the same today that tomorrow than it is today. It might be more, fat chance, but it's probably going to be less. So we've got to know we're making some kind of interest. In the payback model, we're only worried about cash until we pay it off. And then we're not worried about it anymore, right? Well, that's a kind of a short-sighted view, although I've seen it happen, right? So we're not considering the profitability of a project. We're just considering how soon we pay off the project.
So,
Now,
you
yes.
pay out the project, and what happens? There's no more project, or we go find another project?
Well, presumably, the project was one that it means that those cash flows continue even though we didn't take those into account when we were deciding whether we should do this project. Or it could be a thing like a compliance project, a service project, right? We have to put in new pollution equipment. How soon is that paid off compared to paying the EPA fines for every day we're in operation. Right, so there can be valid reasons you want to use the payoff method, but ordinarily I wouldn't use it. I have used it when I worked for Texas A&M. We were on contract to the Corpus Christi Army Depot, and every improvement we would suggest, we would justify by the payback method, because those guys were so unsophisticated, they refused to believe that money would change value over time. I have no excuse for this kind of thing. All right, so net present value means that we figure out what is this project worth to us if we start it today. Right? We take all the cash flows that we expect from it, both positive and negative, the investment we'd have to put in today, the revenue we expect in the future, the costs we expect in the future. We bring those all back to right now, and we say, okay, building a nuclear power plant is worth $10 million to us today. Or, you know, whatever our project is. Now, I assume that y'all have been taught how to do these kinds of calculations in your finance classes. Oh, thank God for that. Right, this kind of calculation is actually something that we teach our engineering students to do in engineering economy class. Although in engineering economy, we sometimes judge projects on present value, sometimes on their annual value, and sometimes on their future value. And they can be judged on return on investment also. Right, but y'all know how to do that, so let's not go any further into that. Right, so we know that we have a minimum attractive rate of return for our company, right? And often that is pretty hefty. Like a lot of companies will say, if we're not going to make 20% on this project, just forget it. We compute the present value of all the cash flows that we see, right? And sometimes that will be, we'll say, you know what, for 5 years we're going to make money off this project, even though we know if things go good, it'll continue after that period. But it's hard to find a project that lasts for infinity. So if we have a positive net present value, that means that we're going to make money by the minimum attractive rate of return, and we can think more about whether this is a good project. If it's a negative net present value, then we're going to say, you know what, let's not do this. Unless it's a compliance project and we just really have no choice. Then we're just looking for the lowest or the least negative net present value. All right, so here they're comparing two projects using the payback method. You can use the payback method with, oh my God, I've almost used up the class time. You can use the payback method with interest rate. It makes it a little more complex to calculate, but I mean, if you've got Excel, oh my God, I can beat up these financial calculations like nobody's business. I mean, give me a break. So, you look, we've got Project A and Project B, we've got the investments, the annual savings from each of those, and how many, how long it would be to pay them back, and their rate of return or ROI. And I'm looking here at rate of return. All right, so it's 9 divided by 8. Oh, bloody hell. You call that a rate of return? All right, so they're not really calculating in interest in this. They're just saying this is kind of the ratio of the annual cash flow to the initial investment. So we might say, if we can only do one of these projects, then how do we decide? Right? We've got $750,000 in the bank to do a project. Right? So that means we can't do both of them. Right? Because
Yeah.
one's $700,000 and one's $400,000. So which one should we do? Well, it's very tempting to say Project A because we have annual savings that are very high, $225,000, and we pay back in a shorter time.
And a larger percentage of return rate of return.
I'm sorry, you have to say that a little more
And a
loudly.
larger percentage for rate of return, 32.1%.
Right, although I still say that's not a proper rate of return. But, okay, you know, Project A does look better. Now, the problem is, if we have $600,000, it's obvious where we're going. Because if we have to go borrow that extra $100,000, then we know that is going to cost extra interest, and that would have to be taken into account.
And it might be, Project B will be the better, if we had to borrow the extra 100,000.
Oh, absolutely, because that's going to change these calculations all around and stand them on their head. Okay, but the same two projects, when we compare them by the net present worth method, we say, you know what? Project A is still looking good because the net present worth is $54,235. On the other hand, Project B starts to look like crap because it's got a negative net present value. This is why I say kind of important to use interest rates and figure out what are we going to get ourselves into. Because when you just use simple payback, you can get led down the garden path pretty easily. All right, so we're going to start on this this slide next time because I've used up our class period. Are there any questions at this time? Are there any questions y'all would like to ask at a later time?
this is more of a personal question. How, going with your engineering degree, you had to learn all about financial calculations as well, doing project management stuff? Or was it until you got into project management you had to kind of?
I actually started managing projects when I was 16. Now, admittedly, the projects I was managing then were fairly simplified compared to what I did later when I worked for A&M, and I'm managing projects that cost millions of dollars. I didn't actually learn formally about project management until I went to graduate school to become an industrial engineer. They taught us engineering economy when I was an undergraduate, but I was studying mechanical engineering. Industrial engineering is more about organization, how the business aspect of engineering. So I learned a lot more about it then, but I studied a lot of stuff on my own. I started studying Parkinson and how organizations work when I was an undergraduate, and that was something that stood me in good stead. So I hope that at least partially answers your question.
Partially.
Well, you'll have to ask more questions later.
Okay.
Okay, so that's it for today's class. Have fun. I'll post the video. Uh-oh, there's something up on chat.
Okay, have a good evening or weekend.
And Tylen, I'm finally seeing your chat. The 7th edition is correct, but the bookstore didn't tell me that we had changed editions, so I still haven't been able to download the PowerPoints that go with the 7th edition. So I carefully compared the 6th edition book and 7th, and for the moment we can continue to use these. All right, have fun. Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. It really doesn't matter what the weather, as long as we can face it all together.